Hello and welcome to another episode of Space Update. Coming up today's show, we'll be talking Starship SN9 and 10, NASA, and did we just get a call from Proxima Centauri? All this and more coming up. I'm your host Ryan, and join me today's.
I'm Mikko, the host of Deep Dive Fridays.
I'm another space nut.
And let's get started, guys. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you had a great Christmas and everything. We're going to kick off with a story that just developed over December in the Christmas period. The JAXA returned samples from Hayabusa2. Finally cracked open the sample box and started sifting through all the little sample rocks and everything like that. Some of them were just up to about a centimetre in size. It's quite surprising, that.
Yeah, those samples do sound quite big.
Definitely quite a nice haul for JAXA.
Yeah, they said that they got 50 times more than expected. They wanted to collect 5.5 grams of asteroid dust was recovered from the actual asteroid Ryugu, but it's about quite considerably more. But when you see the images, it's quite surprising how little they actually collected from there. But they're actually looking to collect less than that. 5.4 grams when you think about it. When you see the pictures, it looks like a lot, but 5.4 grams isn't a lot. But then they only need a few grains to break down and do all the science side on it, really.
Yeah, I think the actual size of the capsules was maybe like a width of your finger.
Yeah, and the actual return capsule was smaller than a shoebox with like a little metal plate with a parachute strapped to it, I think.
Yeah, piece of metal in the capsule is pretty interesting.
Yeah, they seem to think it would be from like the ejector from when they some sort of harpoon that chucked it down or stirred up the surface or something like that. So they're assuming it's just something from the spacecraft that's in the way it's collected the material and just ended up in there somehow, hopefully. If not, it's just some space debris that somehow got all the way out there or maybe something else. We never know.
Yeah, most likely it's not aliens.
And more interestingly, Jim Bernstein's announced that off the back of all this, they're increasing funding to JAXA from 120 million up to 500 million off the back of this, and collaborating and sharing samples between NASA and JAXA for the Hayabusa samples, but also the OSIRIS-REx samples when all that gets back, which is quite a considerable amount when you think about it. It's almost like a 400% increase from 120 million up to 500 million funding. It's a hell of a lot considering it's another country's space program, essentially.
I mean, it shows JAXA's intent to head towards the moon as part of the Artemis program, doesn't it? They're forming a really strong relationship with NASA, and a step up in budget like that is the difference between not going to the moon and going to the moon, in my opinion. I feel it's a really strong indicator that JAXA are shooting towards the moon, what with them signing the Artemis Accords as well.
Yeah, and off the back of that, I mean, Jim Bernstein put a tweet out saying that he'd be increasing it to from 120 to 500, and it'll increase Japan's important role in the Artemis program. But funnily enough, they've obviously replied, "Thank you, Jim Bernstein, for the support. Japan will work with NASA and global partners to open together for the Artemis era." So they're fairly active and want to get involved with the Artemis program and going back to the moon, and we'll probably see more of these missions from the likes of Hayabusa going to and from the moon, maybe to areas we've never explored before.
Yeah, we need more asteroid missions, more missions to maybe even comets.
Definitely. I mean, off the back of this, you could think, would they send a similar thing, the Hayabusa, to the likes of some other moons, maybe further afar? Would they maybe try and land on one of the moons and everything around Mars or something like that, rather than landing on the complications of landing on Mars? Maybe land on, I don't know, Phobos or something like that that's orbiting around Mars.
Yeah, Phobos would be great.
Bit more tricky because it is smaller and everything, and obviously probably I think slightly rotating and everything like that, but can't see it being a problem.
Much easier to land on than Mars itself.
Yeah, so like I say, there's lots of developments going on in that, and in the coming months we'll probably learn more and more, and then everyone eagerly looks forward to the return of the OSIRIS-REx. A bit of time before that one gets back, but again, some great sample return missions coming up in the future. And moving on to our next little news bit, the International Space Station is now home to the world's first commercial airlock, and both versions of the Dragon module on the International Space Station, the crew version and the cargo version. And that's the Bishop airlock, the new commercial ones, considerably bigger than previous airlocks, from what I remember.
I mean, I was excited when we saw the Nanorex Bishop's airlock on the back of a Dragon in that trunk section. We got really good views, and I was really impressed at just how quickly that was installed to the space station. And hopefully, it's going to be our gateway to more science.
Yeah, definitely. It will allow us to do quite a bit of more science. And speaking about dragons, I think there will be a dragon capsule either crew or cargo for the next 14 months on the station. So there will be no dragonless time.
Yeah, and the Bishop airlock, it's not only is it the first of its kind, but it's also the largest scale piece of space hardware the company has actually constructed, Nanoracks. So there's a lot more exciting stuff to come from them. I imagine whether they're involved with the Gateway project, I don't know, or whether they're going to help develop the International Space Station more for commercial companies.
I mean, we've seen plans to commercialize the space stations more and more as it's coming towards its end of life. There's commercial flights available if you've got the money. I wouldn't necessarily say that for our sort of wage bracket of people will be going anytime soon, but to know that there is going to be private citizens up there is quite exciting.
Yeah, and I know we previously covered this on Becoming Multiplanetary with Rich and Karge and everyone. So that'd be a good episode if anyone's interested more in space stations and future space stations. Definitely check that previous episode out on Becoming Multiplanetary. Really good episode, that one on space stations, if you want to dive into all that little world of space stations and everything. And probably November, December time, we've got another signal from Proxima Centauri. Investigations underway into an intriguing radio wave mission that appeared to have come from the direction of Proxima Centauri, near a star to our sun. It was a narrow beam of radio waves that was picked up during the 30 hours of observations by the Parkes telescope in Australia. That was back in April and May last year that they actually picked it up, but it wasn't released later on that they picked up these observations after a bit of just research and making sure it was definitely legit before they let it all out. But analysis has been underway for some time, and scientists have yet to identify a terrestrial culprit for it. Ground-based equipment, or whether it was passing satellite, but clues so far that the signal lasted for around 3 hours and it was actually slow moving. They don't seem to think it was an actual satellite because of the wave band of radio signals that it was transmitting.
I mean, the fact that we got a signal back is interesting. Whether it is interference from our own equipment sending signals out, or whether it is something more.
Yeah, I mean they're still looking into it because they've recently said that they've looked into it a little bit more, and it's using an unusual, like I said, the unusual wave band that satellites are not supposed to use. So whether it's something else, a secret satellite of some sort that's just got accidentally picked up, but they can't declassify that information or what. But it's definitely really interesting. But if we send a message back, obviously it'll take quite a while to get a reply if it's actually a signal of any kind, or whether it's just a bunch of stars just absolutely exploding and sending radio waves and all sorts across the galaxy.
It's going to be an interesting story to follow, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I'm keeping my eye on this one, and I'll bring you more updates as it comes along in the new year. And remember when I mentioned that SpaceX do not actually have the ability to launch the Super Heavy booster just a month or two ago due to the FAA license and environmental regulations? Well, they finally seems to be catching up with all that. We've seen around on the news that the FAA environmental review on the Starship and the Super Heavy booster, it's all under review. And they've actually opened it up to the public to submit information, which is quite interesting. So I kind of guessed this before it actually got announced, because it was up on the FAA website that the current license doesn't actually cover everything that SpaceX are doing right now or potentially doing in the coming months. So it's quite interesting that they'll open it up to the public to put their input on that.
Well, I think it's quite important to have public's opinion. Those nearest cities are quite close, and well, the noise from booster could break windows on South Padre Island. So my guess is that they will have some test flights, but maybe the real orbital flights will be from the ocean.
Yeah, I think the orbital flights though will have to evacuate the area more because people have already pre-warned and said that when the full size super heavy booster along with Starship on top there, 15 to 16 million pounds of thrust, depending on the end result of the Raptor engines, it's just going to knock out windows and all sorts. So all those little villages close by that everyone's in at the moment, they'd be definitely under threat from the just literally the force of that rocket taking off and maybe breaking a few windows and God knows what else from the force of it.
Yeah, and I think the exclusion area is about 15 kilometers or 10 miles.
Yeah, I mean it's still a considerable area and everything, but with it being such a larger rocket, the super heavy booster, I imagine it. When we think back to SM4 when that exploded, I think it'll be a hell of a lot of a massive bang, if you like, or explosion. If the super heavy booster went up in flames, quite a bit of a deadly explosion, that one.
I did watch a video the other day where they compared the Starship to the Russian N1 rocket. Because when the N1 rocket blew, that was the biggest non nuclear explosion ever created. And that was a yield of 1 to 7 megatons. And the Starship holds twice that fuel.
Yeah, so I read that. Yeah, and I just thought, oh my god, if that thing goes sideways at any point, it's just going to be a ridiculous explosion, and it won't just wipe out a portion of the a portion of the launch pad. It'll just obliterate it, I think. But depending on how well they built it, who knows?
I mean, if we saw a RUD on the pad with a fully loaded Starship and Super Heavy, it would be an environmental disaster.
Yeah, but we have seen the down at Boca Chica they are building bunkers of sorts to protect critical hardware and everything. We saw some of the cranes either going to move it or they have moved some of the bunkers that protect some of the critical hardware that feeds some of the fuel lines to the rockets and stuff like that.
I mean, so SpaceX do have a good safety record. You know, they do have RUDs and they do have mistakes, but generally speaking, they act on safety more than, say, launch cadence. They're not rushing to get something to space and skipping the safety element or the safety aspects. You know, when we've seen previous variants of the Starship RUD, we've seen disappointment from the SpaceX team and the community. And I think a lot of people just assume that Elon Musk's trying to throw hardware out as quickly as possible in order to achieve his goal, when realistically we've seen a lot of stops in closure dates and cancellations and stuff because there's a small safety aspect that they can't quite figure out the risk of ignoring. So they'll shut down for a week and then they'll get back on it and then they'll post new closure dates, and we tend to see testing activity.
Yeah, they're super cautious on everything, more than what people realise. I mean, when they do all those tests and everything down at Boca Chica, there's no one on site whatsoever, other than the little robotic dog. The Spot, was it Spot? The robotic
The
Boston Dynamics.
Boston Dynamics robotic dog.
Yeah. And speaking of Elon, we've got a recent tweet just to throw a spanner in the works there of the Super Heavy booster. He tweeted out that we're going to try and catch the Super Heavy booster with the launch tower arm using the grid fins to take the load, which has blown a few people's minds, and everyone's trying to fathom out how that works.
So far, I think I've seen probably two really good animations. One of those was in a Marcus House video, and the other one was on Twitter. And I'm going to be terrible and say I can't remember the name of the artist in either of those cases, but I will find those links out.
I know Eric X Space, who we've had on the show, I believe. He had he's put his ideas in there, and Elon actually came back to him because they had almost like a suspended, if you imagine a C-shaped frame where the booster comes down and moves into the C-shaped frame, then lowers itself down. But then Elon replied to him and said, "It's you've got to keep the top open because the rocket's not going to move sideways. The rocket's just going to come straight down and it's going to land on the platform." So I thought it was interesting that he's actually interacting with these guys who are trying to fathom out the problem. But at the same time, I imagine it's Elon splurting things out, and then he can get the guys out there to conjure up the 3D animations to. And I'm assuming that a lot of this stuff's helping Elon figure out whether things are possible as well.
Yeah, I would think so. Our 3D animators have gotten so good that they probably do just as good animations as the SpaceX team.
Just a shame they don't get paid for it.
Yeah.
They obviously get credit from all their supporters and everything like that, obviously, but just I'd love to see SpaceX and the likes of take advantage and give credit to a lot of these guys out there on Twitter and YouTube and everywhere. They put a hell of a lot of work into all this stuff, and I'm surprised they don't use these guys a lot more to basically promote their hardware systems and the rockets and everything else.
Well, for SpaceX, it's kind of the people do it for free, so for them, it's just okay.
And also we spotted Raptor number 49 on the pad getting fitted to SN9, ready for a static fire, possibly just in the next coming days ahead of another test flight.
Nice.
So it's just saying it's exciting stuff to know that they're going to be launching hardware very soon.
Yeah, definitely. And they've also got SN10, which has just literally been the nose cone's been mounted to the main body of that one, and I believe it's got fins and ailerons or whatever or ailerons, Elon-rons or whatever you want to call it. So whatever happens to SN9, successful or not, we've got SN10 literally weeks away from falling on from SN9, and a lot of people are speculating we'll have two rockets on side by side on the test stands.
Yeah, we don't really need to speculate because Elon replied to RGV Aerial's photograph with two starships that there will be two.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of exciting things going down at Boca Chica, and obviously later on this year we've got the likes of ULA's Vulcan Centaur rocket coming online, and potentially New Glenn. We haven't heard a peep from Blue Origin or anything like that on that rocket, so we'll just wait and see what comes. Hopefully within the coming months with that, whether they'll make any announcements of when they're going to showcase the rocket, because I imagine they want to show the rocket off before they actually test it and everything, and potentially blow it up to smithereens if anything goes wrong.
Yeah. Still about SN9, what would be your predictions on the launch date?
SN9, I believe it probably should. It's all dependent on those engines if and the fuel mix. If it's because the only issue before I believe was they didn't quite flip it early enough on the descent. That might flip. They'll probably do the same flight profile as before. The launch, the flip, cutting up the engines off as it goes up to the apogee, flops down, lands. But I think the only difference they'll do is maybe flip it a bit earlier so they can have a little bit more time to do that landing procedure, and fingers crossed the engines behave themselves this time so they can actually slow down enough without obliterating the entire thing. And might get to see the landing legs attempt to do their job, but I think the landing legs might fail them again.
Yeah, and Scott Manley actually did a video talking about the new landing idea and also talked about the pressure problems of the header tanks. And for SN9, they might be using helium instead of autogenous pressure system. So that could help with the pressure.
But yeah, I think we'll see some changes in the header tank, definitely, because I saw that video from Scott Manley and everything. But there's still a few alterations to do on the rocket itself, because it's still using the cold thrusters as far as I'm aware. So when they switch to the hot thrusters, which are located on the nose and elsewhere to push the rocket nose cone forward side and control the roll slightly, once they use those hot thrusters, they'll have a lot more control. Not that they necessarily need it, but they'll have a lot more access control for the RCS thrusters and everything. So we'll yet to see the improvements on that. Probably SM15 for that one, possibly slightly different internal design.
Yeah, for sure. Looks like we have a listener question from one of our patrons, Stinger NSW. He's asking, will the repairs to the landing pad delay SN9 from launching sooner rather than later?
I don't think they will. I think the landing pad took minimal damage, and I don't think it was a structural issue, more just a ring imprinted in the top.
Yeah, I think the landing pad was barely untouched, although it did come down with a bit of a thud and explode and everything. I believe it'll just be more of a case of getting all the debris out of the way and everything, and just quickly checking it's okay. It's not too badly damaged. Because I imagine that landing pad, the concrete on that's probably a good 6 to 10 feet thick, I imagine, just to purely make sure it stabilize the rocket on landing, and B, basically not incinerate once if there's an explosion. Because they're used to building these things, for example, with the Falcon 9 and everything, and all the stuff associated with Pad 39As. They've had a lot of experience from all that, so I imagine they know what they're doing.
Yeah, but actually, did you notice that recently they took a bit of the pad out? I think they cut the part where SN8 landed, so there's quite a bit of block missing from the landing pad.
Yeah. So I mean, there's still in an earlier video did still show the full thing and everything. Just added a few extra bits in there, but I've noticed recently they took a little bit of the video out of there and everything. Fair enough if they want to do that. If they want to do that, it's their own thing. But it's a bit strange that they've done that, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe they just want to make sure the pad is smooth all the way.
Yeah, and we also over on Twitter, 'cause Elon's very active on there. Hinted at that they might be keeping the nose cone from SN8 as a little shrine of sorts, but whether they will or not, I don't know. Whether it's how badly damaged it is. We've seen it sitting there for quite a considerable time, so whether it gets scrapped, whether they keep it, I don't know.
I would think so that they would actually move it from landing pad somewhere else.
Yeah, and we've got that mysterious concrete display stand of sorts just away from the test stands and landing pad and everything. I don't know if you've seen that yourself, Miko. It's essentially a small square. Well, I'll say small, it's quite large, really, to contain or sit one of the boosters or one of the starships on. So just a small square of concrete just set off close to the road, and everyone's speculating to what it is. There's no frame as such or anything there yet, so whether they're going to sit the first successful landing Starship on there and just say, because they do eventually, once all the development's almost complete, I imagine they're going to move the Starship program to a more secure area, and they're building cafes and all sorts down there at the moment. Obviously, for future development for once the program is fully active.
Could it be for the nose cone?
I don't think so. It was. It looked very similar to the orbital launch stand platform, like the concrete platform that was all built on. I'll bring you an image over later on. But it's essentially a small square platform that looks very similar to the orbital test stand or launch stand, if you like. But it was quite close to the road, so a lot of people are speculating that it won't actually be a launch stand. It might just be a display stand for the very first successful Starship or booster, or maybe both, and they might just stack it all up beside the road, just for basically like a monument for everyone to see. I think.
Yeah.
In a way, they've already done that with the little hopper and just attached all sorts to it, and I think they're using it essentially as a storage tank as well, which is a bit hilarious.
Yeah, that could definitely be.
I mean, a lot of people are overlooking the fact that this is the next step towards something, and like the general population are dismissing the fact that things like SN8's nose cone are important. Like I personally would love nothing more than to see that thing hanging at Hawthorne beside the Dragon capsule they've got there.
Yeah, that would be a great way to show the success of SN8 on every live stream.
Definitely.
Because I mean, it was successful despite what the mainstream media and stuff are saying. It proved a lot of things for SpaceX. It proved that belly flop maneuver. It proved that they could actually get something that big off the ground, which is surprising all in itself. It played Pathfinder for a lot of important things to come.
The big thing this year, I think we'll see from down at Boca Chica is obviously SN9 and 10 doing another test launch. SN9's predicted to go a bit higher and the landing and everything. Whether that will be successful, but also we're seeing the lunar version of Starship sitting there. Well, part of it sitting there. Not a lot going on so far. So we yet to see a presentation from Elon and just Elon in general and the lunar Starship.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to see.
I'm really excited to see that because obviously we've seen Dynetics, we've seen Blue Origin's contraption of sorts. It looks a bit of a mess, that one, but I'm excited to see the lunar Starship. We obviously know vaguely what it's going to look like from obviously all the visual mock-ups everyone's done and everything, but it would be great to see SpaceX's take on it, and everyone really wants to see what the inside looks like because the amount of room in that thing is pretty staggering.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you mentioned Blue Origin there. I know it's not necessarily in the cover of this when you recorded the intro, but did anybody see that the autonomous drone ship that Blue Origin have got its name this week?
I didn't catch that. No, what the finally named the ship?
They've named it after Jeff's mother, Jacqueline.
Ah, that's good. Good nod to her and everything. That's great. That.
It shows a step forward in their progressively slow attempt at getting giant rockets to orbit.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we've seen. Apparently, we're going to see a lot of new Shepards this year. Do some more test launches and everything. Because obviously, in the past year, 2 years, we've only seen one launch from them actually. And so the little new Shepard rocket they've promised that they said they're going to at least launch 3 or 4 times this year, which isn't a lot when you consider SpaceX have launched over 50. So quite staggering, but they're slowly getting there. They'll be an orbital company eventually.
Yeah. How about we make a few guesses for this year? Uh, what would you think would be the first company to launch humans, either Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic?
I
And
think
will
Virgin
they launch this year?
I think out of the two, Virgin Galactic's more likely to have a human space flight, but that's just my opinion.
I think Virgin Galactic, providing they get their engine problems fixed, because they seem to have a teething problem with Launcher One and obviously Virgin Galactic's base plane, which is names just I've got brain fog right now. I know it's Unity something. Can't remember the name of the plane.
Yeah, me neither. But I would also go with Virgin Galactic. I mean, always have the pilot on board.
I mean, both Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin are both reasonably close to certifying the systems for humans going on there. Not just test pilots and everything, actually people from probably from the space community first, or other astronauts, just to prove it out before they let the general public even consider going on there. But they're not too far away, to be honest, because they both have done basic test flights in previous years and everything, so they're not actually too far away, really.
Yeah. And second guess, will Starship go orbital this year and when?
I would say yes by the middle of the year at the latest.
I'd say back end of the year because they've got to get this environmental review done and approved by the FAA, Environmental Agency. But secondly, they've got to prove out the booster first because Elon said it'll be a good few months before the first booster is actually going to basically hop or whatever they decide to do with that, or whether they just decide to go with it. Because I imagine the first one might attempt to land in similar to the Falcon 9 ish, just landing straight out on the pad without any support as such. But I can't imagine that going too well.
Yeah, I would go with the end of the year, maybe some October time frame. And Stinger NSW is having a good comment for our Virgin Galactic New Shepard competition, saying Tom Cruise will beat them all.
Definitely. There's also the Russians are hot on the heels of Tom Cruise, I think, with one of their actors from over in Russia. Because I think they're eagerly to trying to beat Tom Cruise up to the International Space Station to film some sort of movie show. I don't know what they want to do, but I think either way, whenever Tom Cruise gets there, it's just going to be crazy.
I think people like Tom Cruise, although we dismiss it and we have a chuckle because we're big rocket nerds, I think at that moment that Tom Cruise is aboard the ISS, it's going to open up the idea of going to space for more people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Like prior to that, we've seen astronauts and payload specialists, mission specialists, and the like going up to the International Space Station, but we haven't actually seen very many private passengers that are recognizable faces to the masses. And I think when a lot of people that are just in the general population see somebody like Tom Cruise aboard the International Space Station, it sort of opens your mind up that, hold on a second, this isn't just astronauts going there. It's not just mission specialists going there and the most elite people at NASA that are flying up to the space station, but actually Tom Cruise, somebody I've seen in movies, is going.
Yeah, and it's just people having that connection with people who've watched over the years on the TV and movie screen and everything like that. And then seeing them in space, it's just like, oh my God, I aspire to, people aspire to be movie stars and stuff like that. But now Tom Cruise is in space, it won't just be, I want to be a movie star, it'll be, I want to be up there myself on the International Space Station or the moon or wherever it'll end up going, kind of thing.
Yeah, seeing Tom Cruise in space on a movie will, well, it will make many of the people in the world actually know about SpaceX. I would say less than 10% of people in the world actually know SpaceX is flying people to the space.
Yeah, definitely. Because you always have that situation where, I mean, myself, I've talked to some people. I've got a job outside of this, believe it or not. I mentioned things to them. I was like, "Oh, Starship, this, that, and the other." And it's like, I thought they already flying that one. I was like, no. So it's just one of those things. Like although we're complete space nerds and stuff like that, and space nuts, we're all into it. We know what's happening day in, day out. So we sometimes mention things to some other people and they're just completely unaware about it. But I mean, it's fair enough. Everyone's into their own thing. But like you say, Miko, it's probably only like well, 10% of people are aware of generally space and things that are going on and the massive things happening at the moment. And that other 90% are completely aware. And to get that other 90% interested in space, science, whatever it may be, it'd be absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely.
Is there any other questions or anything like that before we wrap up?
I think that's it.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. I've been Ryan from the Space Update.
I've been Mikko, the host of Deep Dive Fridays.
I've been another space nut, and I'm wishing you all the best for 2021.
And a big thank you to all our Patreon supporters. Sammy Oscuro, What About It, Jixan, Sebastian, Gaio Palagari, sorry about that if I'm butchering your name, Framrick, Susie, Marco. If you'd like to support what we do here on Total Space Network, gain access to exclusive content and early access to episodes like these guys, head over to patreon.com/Total Space. And where else can we find us, Miko?
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at TotalSpaceNet. You can also find us on Instagram, YouTube, and on YouTube we actually started doing live streams and we actually have the latest interview with Graham Lau, that's with video. And you can of course find us on your favorite podcast platforms.
Yeah, like, subscribe, and everything on YouTube. I've been Ryan from the Space Update. I'll catch you next week for all the latest news updates.